I believe so, yeah.
And
yeah,
will be up on some website or
yeah, so on business in the
business
community.
community
Yeah.
website. Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, I should say, and welcome to this Business in the Community event. We're delighted to have you all here. A great turnout. Just to give you a little bit of information about who we are, Business in the Community, for those of you that don't know, is a network of Ireland's largest, I suppose, Indigenous and international companies. We've over 65 members, and our purpose within the network is to provide our members with the development of strategic corporate responsibility initiatives. So we help our members to develop their CSR policies, strategies and practices. I suppose from our point of view, we like to see corporate responsibility across 5 pillars. They're community, environment, workplace, marketplace, and then the whole communications and management of corporate responsibility. I suppose this thinking is really evolved now, that really those 5 pillars are sustainable development. They are the environment, they are the socio-political, and they are the economic. And we're helping our member companies to develop sustainable strategies in the way that they run. I'm delighted in that context to have 3 really good speakers for our event today, hopefully covering those 3 pillars: the social, the environmental, and the economic. We have Dr. Matthew Crowe from the Environmental Protection Agency, Lois Guthrie from the International Integrated Reporting Council, and Justin Kilcullen, Director of TROCRA. And I'm also delighted to welcome Gabriel Darcy, our chairman for the day from Board Namona, who will hopefully guide the event throughout the time. Our partners as well in this event, we have the Irish Corporate Leaders on Climate Change, a progressive network of Irish companies who have come together to try and push the business direction and story on the climate change issue. And of course, Science Gallery, who very kindly welcomed us here today. I'd also like to bring your attention to a little piece of art fitting with the Science Gallery's idea of linking art with science. And this is a beautiful piece by Helen O'Malley, a young ceramics artist from NCAD. These are, I think, making the invisible the visible. She's taken everyday rubbish, but crafted really beautiful ceramic pieces. And do feel free to come up and pick those up and take a look at them, just to get an idea as to the artistic value that is necessary in the understanding of joined-up thinking. For me, just to set the context, I wanted to just touch on a couple of really, as I would see them, key pieces of information. And I wanted to talk about, of all things, market bubbles, where the market actually can build up inbuilt errors in its system, in the way that it functions. Similar to the dot-com or the credit bubble, we really are now facing into a carbon bubble. And I suppose if we take a look at where this reality is coming from, there is hard science now that is clearly explaining to us that the atmosphere, our planet's atmosphere, can take approximately 1 trillion tons of extra carbon dioxide above the level that it was in the pre-industrial era. So 1 trillion tons of carbon, that's our budget. So how essentially that equates to a 2-degree warming in our atmosphere. If we go above that, we're moving into very risky territory. So when we take a look at the research that was carried out by the Potsdam Institute on this whole area, as of 2000, that budget, and I suppose the legacy of carbon up to 2000, left us with a figure of 886 gigatons left out of that 1,000 gigatons that we had pre-industrial level. The trouble is, we're now ramping that up even faster, and in the last 10 years, we've used up about 36% of that 886 gigatons, where our budget is now at 565 gigatons globally. This is to secure our planet from going above 2 degrees warming. Yet when we take a look at the amount of fossil fuel reserves available to us, they equate to about 5 times the amount of carbon that our atmosphere can actually take. So if we actually take that stuff out of the ground, we're likely to have 5 times over the budget allocation that we have available to us. And when we take a look at this global reserve of fossil fuels and see what is actually listed on the global stock exchange markets, we see that 100 of the largest coal and 100 of the largest oil and gas companies hold collectively enough carbon in the order of about 750 gigatons of carbon. So really where that leaves us, even if the listed stock exchange value of those companies was to be released, leaves us beyond our 556 amount. So this reality, I suppose, means that we need to look at those reserves and how they are valued on global stock exchange. Companies are potentially overvalued to the tune of 80% if we were to take this 2-degree warming budget seriously. So where does this leave us with regards to a transition to a green economy? Well, it's very clear that we do need, first of all, to see that we look at these proven and listed fossil fuel reserves and their potential if we burn them. What are the potential risks? We need to look at it's very obvious, a science-based carbon budget approach to climate risk management. We need to recognize that the carbon intensity of the global stock exchanges and this potential risk that is there, this bubble risk that is likely in the future if we take this 2-degree threshold seriously, and the impacts on our global markets. We need to see that carbon dioxide reporting is a very significant challenge, and that companies need to really evolve in this space. And hopefully Lois will be able to give us a better understanding on this whole area of involved and integrated reporting. And finally, we need to see that there is an important role for regulation, for the regulator to see this risk on the horizon and actually make efforts to preempt a catastrophic devaluation of some very large companies on our global stock market. So, from a business in the community point of view, we really are trying to assist our members in tackling these complex problems. We have an integrated tool that is available to our members called the Business Working Responsibly mark. Last year, we awarded this to 4 of our leading companies, Microsoft, the ESB, CRH, and Intel. And we have Elise McCarthy, our program manager, here today, if anyone would like to find out more about it. And next Wednesday, in Business in the Community, we will have an information day on the Business Working Responsibly mark. I'd like to bring your attention to our information sheet on it. Do please take a copy of this with you. It's in the reception room above to gain more information, and we have some back at the back of the room here. So do please take one of those to get a better understanding of the Business Working Responsibly mark. And I would like to now, please, if I can to hand over to Gabriel Darcy, CEO of Bord na Móna, to guide us through the rest of the day, and hopefully you'll gain valuable information and insights to our event. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gavin. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honour to be here. And indeed, what a fantastic setting for such a conference. Science Gallery has made a fantastic contribution already in the short time that it's been in existence in bringing science to the people and making it relevant. And one of the big issues that we, of course, face is trying to make science relevant. And it goes to the heart of what we're talking about today. Let me start with a little story. I'm going to try and get through this fairly fast. It's going 2 paragraphs on the introduction of a book by Andrew Savitz called The Triple Bottom Line. It's a very interesting story. The whaling industry personified American prosperity for over 100 years. It employed 70,000 sturdy New Englanders and fueled hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses here and abroad, earning fortunes for boat owners and more than a few enterprising crewmates. The intrepid whaler was celebrated in song, story, and even high art, including what is arguably the greatest novel, Melville's Moby Dick. Whaling was a tale of courage and initiative, a tale of America. Today, nearly all the whales are gone, and so is the industry built around them. The decline began in the mid-1840s when hunters ignored decreasing stocks and continued harpooning greys, rights, humpbacks, and other species of this enormous, elegant mammal. Within a few years, the industry that had thrived for a full century collapsed entirely. The era of American whaling still stands as a symbol, but now it represents the short-sightedness of businessmen whose thirst for profit made their enterprise unsustainable. And I guess I try to tell that story because it actually is the essence of what sustainability is about. It's not just about environmental sustainability. It's also about social and about environmental and economic sustainability. Endurability is another term that I use interchangeably. I certainly use it within Bord na Móna. And, you know, sustainability in a corporation, to me, is one that creates profit. Definitely, we need to create profit for shareholders while protecting and acknowledging the environment and improving the lives of those with which it interacts. Capital is not just about euros and dollars. There's human capital, there's the employees, there's natural capital, the air we breathe, the water we drink, and there's social assets, community, and community gain. We must remember that corporations, the essence of corporations, is to serve the community. To serve the community. It's not to enrich a few people at the expense of others. So it does imply interdependence and interdependability with other stakeholders. It's been played out every day now in the press. We're beginning to see all the false promises of the so-called Celtic Tiger. Sustainability and capitalism are not easy bedfellows. Be under no illusion. Unfettered greed of the type that we have witnessed and evidenced over the 20 or so years of the Celtic Tiger period is clearly and is proven unsustainable. And many organizations have collapsed as a result. Very interestingly, doesn't get highlighted very much, but the scarcest commodity of all in today's Ireland, and indeed in today's Western world, is the concept of trust. It's probably the most valuable ingredient for successful organizations. And when you look at, in this country and indeed internationally, the state of the banks, whose essence is all about trust. You are taking money in trust from people, and you are managing that. And think of the careful build of the trust with financial institutions and their customers and stakeholders over the last 50 years, and see where it's vanished today. And it's not just banks, it's government, regulators, if I dare say, the church. But yet, trust is not measured, or let alone is it managed clearly. And this is a clear failure, in my mind, of the present accountability process. The pace of development and understanding and communication and technology and science it's fast and it's accelerating. You know, I think it was it here 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, scientists claim to have seen, I'm kind of trying to get my head around the nouns and the verbs and the adjectives, but they claim to have found something that appears to be Higgs boson. Understanding of climate and the changes that are taking place largely as a result of human behavior is now pretty well understood. There's no more excuses. You don't have to go too far from our own country to see the impact of climate change and what's going on. Yet, however, we're sensitized. We're told it's okay, we can afford to put up flood defenses. And the critical issue of climate change is falling and has fallen down on our list of priorities. The current and up-to-date insights should be the backbone of our regulatory environment, yet this is often not the case. Setting the right regulatory environment and implementing those regulations, notwithstanding the evaporation of trust that has taken place with regulators over the last number of years. This is critical, especially in areas such as waste and waste management, and the concept of reducing and recycling and reusing. I don't hear that mentioned. I hear incinerators and I hear other such things. Water, the most essential of all commodities, vital for life. Yet we have copious quantities, but how do we manage it? We don't. And indeed, energy. I'm very pleased that Matt Crowe is here, a director from EPA, and he's going to talk about some of these environmental challenges. I spoke a little bit about metrics. The metrics by which we measure progress should not be just in financial terms. It's clearly an evidence every day now. It's these unfortunate people who thought that they were managing responsibly are now being hauled in front of courts and elsewhere. The system has clearly failed us. And come on, let's waken up to this. But we do need metrics. And I come from the school that if it's not measurable, it's not manageable. Los Guthrie, I believe, Los, are you somewhere in the ether? From the International Integrated Reporting Council, I would be very interested to hear what Los has to say about metrics. Of course, the key impacts of our behaviours in the Western world, in this nice, cosy environment that we're in, are not immediately felt by us, but by people in the developing countries. The old adage, out of sight, out of mind, is very relevant here. Justin Kilcullen from Trócaire is very familiar with this particular failure. So, I'd like to open the conference. I'd like to invite the first speaker up, and I'm looking forward for a good discussion, and we'll go through each of the speakers, and then afterwards I would be very, very interested in getting the views and as much views from the audience as is possible. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. There we go. Great to be here in the Science Gallery as well. I came all the way from Wexford this morning. I'm probably one of the few people from the country who's here this afternoon. It's a brilliant resource, this building. We've done a bit of work with the Science Gallery in the past in terms of exhibitions, and I agree wholeheartedly that it helps with the whole question of delivering science and explaining science to the public, which is very important. What I want to talk to you about this afternoon is, first of all, why should business care about this sustainability stuff? What's the whole point of it? A little bit of background about the broader policy context in Europe and in Ireland. A bit about how Ireland's environment is doing. The EPA just recently released its State of the Environment report, which we publish once every 4 years. It was published about a month ago, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information about that. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the supports that the EPA and other state agencies provide to business to help them deal with these sustainability issues. And then I'm peppering a few questions for yourselves as well, and challenges to think about as we go through. So 3 good reasons why you should care. The first one, the world is running out of road. Gavin gave us some very big figures there, the trillion-ton issue about carbon dioxide. So it is the right thing to do to think about these issues and to consider them in your businesses. There are 3 big natural environment challenges for humanity that I put up there: energy, climate change, and natural resources. How we use natural resources and raw materials. And they're all interconnected. Businesses that pay attention to the environment are more likely to thrive in a world of diminishing resources. And you will save money. That's the bottom line on it. You will save money by addressing these issues. We've in the room Maurice Bergen up here, I see, who works with the Green Hospitality Programme. This is the evidence that these things make a difference if you're running a business. Through our National Waste Prevention Programme that the EPA run, we have a number of programmes, and the Green Hospitality is probably the flagship. It's been in operation longer than any of the others. And 220 odd hotels and hospitality businesses are involved in it now. And you can see the scale of the savings that are accruing both environmentally and financially as a result of the relatively simple steps that these businesses are taking in their operations. Similarly with the Green Business Programme, the evidence is beginning to mount up there as well, that taking relatively simple steps, dealing with things like energy, water, waste in your business will make a difference to the environment, and it'll also help save you money. The policy context, there's the language issue here, which is a bit like the communicating science question. This whole area is littered with jargon, okay? And it's part of the job, I suppose, of the likes of myself and other people who are here today to try and cut through the jargon a bit. But when you get into policy talk, you got to listen to take a little bit of the jargon to help get through to where it's all supposed to be leading. And a term that you're going to hear a lot about in the future is resource efficiency. And there's a number of policy instruments now that are coming through Europe that I've listed out here. There's the 2020 roadmap for resource efficient Europe. There's the whole green economy issue that's coming out of that. There's a roadmap for moving to a competitive low carbon economy. And then at European level, all of this environmental stuff tends to come under the umbrella of what's called the environmental action programs. And we're now coming into the 7th of these programs, which have been running for roughly about 30 or 40 years altogether. And there will be a strong focus on resource efficiency and implementation of environmental legislation in the next environmental action program. So this resource efficiency thing has risen up the value chain from a policy point of view, and it is one of the key measures that will be used to tackle climate change as well, because they're both very intricately linked. From a national point of view, there's just two things in particular I want to point out on the slide up there. The first is to do with climate change, that the National Economic and Social Council is currently working on policy options and approaches to the transition to a low-carbon economy. And the Framework for Sustainable Development in Ireland was recently published by the Department of the Environment. And that provides an overarching framework for sustainable development across all the different policy areas. There's, of course, great debate about how effective it is and how integrated it truly is, and I think I'll come to that in a few minutes in terms of one of the challenges identified by the EPA for the future. But in terms of policy, sustainable development is very much rooted. So where's all this leading to? What is the point? What's the policy objective of all of this stuff that is happening at European and now at national level too? Well, you could maybe summarize it as saying that the objective is to build a low carbon and resource efficient economy, and that has to be supported by a clean, healthy and well protected environment, because you can't have one without the other. They're intrinsically linked. I'd settle for a lower carbon and more resource efficient economy and have the metrics which can help see how we're progressing overall in terms of moving in that direction. But at this point, there is no choice. There's no choice anymore. The world and Europe and Ireland has to move in this direction. It's probably going to be over a very long period of time, but it is the way that things have to move, because the energy, the carbon energy is running out, the natural resources are being depleted, so there is really no other option. So how are we doing in Ireland? Well, the SOE report, the State of the Environment report that we published recently, it's a pretty big report. It pulls together a vast amount of information, and what I'm attempting to do here is give you a little bit of summary information about what the overall status of the situation is. So overall, the quality of the environment in Ireland is still of a relatively high quality if you compare it to other places. There are a lot of challenges, a lot of issues in relation to the environment, particularly in areas like water and biodiversity, and the meeting of international commitments. But overall, we're not in that bad a space in terms of the overall quality of the environment. The 4 challenges that the EPA has identified in that report are valuing and protecting our natural environment, building a resource-efficient, low-carbon economy, putting the environment at the centre of our decision-making, and implementing environmental legislation. Now, what I want to talk to you a little bit here is just give you a little bit of a flavour of what those 4 challenges are, but also to ask you questions for yourselves to ponder on and think about in terms of these particular challenges. So the valuing and protecting our natural environment, of course, the EPA thinks that the natural environment should be valued and protected. And the report goes into a lot of detail about the aspects of the environment that are better protected, that are better quality than others are, and points out that particular areas like water and biodiversity need more work. But a question for yourselves in this is, how important is it for me and my business that our natural environment is protected and valued? What is my role in this? And am I prepared to pay for the consequences of having a value on the natural environment? Building a resource-efficient, low-carbon economy. This is a much more difficult area I think, for people to grasp, to get a handle on, than valuing the environment, because we all really do value clean water, clean air, clean soil. But this is the challenging area over the next 10 to 20 years in terms of implementation. How is this actually going to happen? How will this type of a different economy be built? One of the messages here, I suppose, is that it's the opportunity to break the link between consumption and production by focusing on resource efficiency. So we have to break the link between growth, between economic growth as we currently understand it, and resource use. And there's an awful lot of challenges in there. So a question for yourselves on that: what is a green economy? Because there's great debate about what a green economy is amongst the experts. And how can I contribute to its creation, both as an individual and as a business person? The greenhouse projections to 2020 just illustrate the scale of the challenge that we have. The projections published by the EPA estimate that by 2017 we'll have already exceeded the target for reduction of emissions by 2020. So we're foreseeing that there are already problems down the road in terms of meeting our own national targets for greenhouse gases. And the 2 big areas there that are problematic are transport and agriculture. Implementing environmental legislation. Ireland doesn't have a great history in relation to this. Most environmental legislation, if you look back over the past, comes from Europe. It's nearly all, the vast body of environmental legislation, with probably the exception of the planning legislation, which was originally written in the early 60s, flows from environmental directives that have been made in Europe since Ireland joined the European Community back in 1973. So the history of compliance and implementation overall in Ireland over that long period of time hasn't been great, and there are still a lot of challenges in relation to the implementation and the meeting of international commitments in relation to environmental legislation. And greenhouse gases, climate change is a case in point. There are many other things. Water, Gabriel mentioned. Water, we have complete control over water in Ireland. You could argue that we don't have complete control over climate change, but we certainly do have complete control over water. We can work out for ourselves as a nation what to do in terms of ensuring that our water is adequately protected and remains there as a safe and secure resource, which business absolutely needs. Business cannot survive without a well-protected water resource. And it's incredible in Ireland that still there's a sense that not everybody gets that. that, you know, we still think water, it rains all the time, so what's the problem? Why can't we just turn the tap on and get the water for nothing? It's an extremely expensive commodity to produce clean water, and it gets even more expensive if you don't protect it in its natural state. So there are things that we can control ourselves. We need to make sure that we implement the legislation that's there from Europe, implemented in Ireland, to do things like to ensure that we've got a well-protected water resource. So for yourselves, a question on this. Do you fully understand the implications of environmental legislation for your business? And the better regulation thing, we might have a good chat about that later. Business, I have great sympathy for business in terms of regulation, because there's vast rafts of regulation coming at business from all quarters, including the environmental area. And there is an onus on regulators to make it as simple as possible, while not in any way diluting or watering down the effectiveness of the legislation in achieving the objectives that the legislation is set up to do. But there's an awful lot can be done in the middle in terms of improving the overall design and implementation of legislation. And for businesses, you do have to understand what it means for you. So it's a good question for you to think about yourselves. Do you fully appreciate and understand the implications for yourselves? Putting environment at the centre of decision making. This is a really difficult one, because really this is about, like, this is the core of a core objective in terms of environmental protection and management, because it's sectors like transport, it's sectors like agriculture, like energy, that have the impacts on the environment. So unless and until there's a full integration of environmental protection principles within all these different sectors, then there's always a risk that those sectors will operate in a way which is not paying enough attention to the environment. And there are enormous challenges in relation to this, but that's the whole point of having a sustainable development plan for the country too, which is to help drive that integration across all the different policy areas. A simple question for yourselves on that is, in terms of putting the environment at your centre, in terms of your business, is what can I do to reduce my environmental impact and that of my business? And there are a lot of businesses asking that question now. I'm going to try something here on the technology front, which I don't know whether it'll work or not, but we're going to give it a go anyway, because I want to just show you where you can access a lot of the different supports that are available to business to help them deal with questions like energy use, water use, waste management. And to do that, we're going to have a look through try and get onto the website here. Yeah, I'm going to have to ask for your help. Sorry about this. Oh, there we are. Great. So if you go onto the EPA's website, you will find on the front page of the EPA's website, at the top right-hand corner, find out how to be green. And when you click on that, it'll bring you into the section of the website which has within it all of the different information on all the different supports. Now, I'm not going to go into this in any detail because otherwise we'll be there all afternoon. But you can see from what I'm showing there that there is a portal into guides, into programs like the Green Hospitality Program I mentioned earlier and the Green Business Program. There's a guide into other information you can find out about resource efficiency, things that you can do. And then there's a link there's a portal which will bring you to the supports that are available from the likes of Sustainable Energy Ireland and Enterprise Ireland and other state agencies that also provide support, because we're very mindful in the EPA of the fact that as far as business is concerned, you don't care where the support is coming from, whether it's coming from us or from some other organ of the state. So what we've done here is to try and make it as easy as possible for businesses to get their hands on the supports that are available. Now, and I've managed to get back to here again. That's great. So, to sum up then, just a number of things that you can think about what you can do when you leave here today, when you go back to your businesses. Start thinking a bit more about energy, water use and waste management, both for yourselves, because you're all householders as well, and as business people. In your home and in your business, think about these issues. Become informed, if you can, about the global issues driving change and innovation that we're going to be talking a lot about today. Because there's one thing we can be absolutely sure of. Climate change will affect us all. It could be argued scientifically that it is affecting us all right now in terms of the changes that are happening. Start using the supports that are available to you, like the things that I've mentioned to you through Be Green and the other programs that are there. And the business-to-business networks, like what's happening here today. I'm sure you did a lot of networking earlier on at the start, and there'll be an opportunity for that later too. That actually is the best way to get information about things like resource efficiency in businesses. And there's nothing beats getting somebody like, for instance, the guy who runs the hotel, Bill Kelly, who runs the hotel down in Rosslare Harbour, who is an absolute guru on resource efficiency in a business setting. So talk to your peers within business who've already taken steps to deal with these issues and learn from them, because that would be a very effective way of doing it. And finally then, decide to take some practical steps to reduce your own and your business's environmental impact. Because we can talk about this stuff till we're blue in the face, but if people don't actually engage like yourselves and do something about it, then it's not going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Lois, is Lois on the...
Danny's going to bring her in there now.
Yeah. So, yes, I'd like to, hopefully Lois will come in. Come in, Lois. And she has certainly reduced her carbon footprint by not being here and present in person.
So I think she's going to come in now. Hello? Hello, Lois?
Hello. Hello, Sockets Gallery.
Yeah, we have you.
Thank you, Lois. You're very welcome. And we're all awaiting with interest to hear what you've got to say on the corporate reporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And hello from sunny Southampton. I'm here today to talk about integrated reporting, as you know, and I very much enjoyed the presentations from Gavin, Gabrielle, and Matt. May I also introduce my colleague Michael Nugent, who is also at the IRC Secretariat, who will be available to answer your questions at the end of the session. We've heard today there isn't really a definition of the green low-carbon economy. If we could have slide 2, please, organisers. Gavin gave a definition which was around 5 pillars: community, environment, workplace, marketplace and communications. The other definitions I've seen come from the Global Green Growth Institute, which describe a green economy as a low-carbon, resource-efficient and socially inclusive economy. In the documents that were circulated to participants in the event today, you've defined green growth as being something that integrates economic performance and environmental stability. And you also said in those papers that green growth requires the mobilization of financial, technological, social, human capital. But why do we need it? If we could have the next slide, please. You'll see that there have been various studies done by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, for example. In their Vision 2050 document, they outline various risks and changes associated with globalization and the changing context in which business operates. I'm sure you're familiar with this presentation. Kevin and Danny, I just want to mention there's a very bad echo at this end. Are you hearing it at your end? Should I stop?
Hello, Lois. Can you hear us? We're having a Skype moment.
I can, but there's a terrible echo at the end.
Oh, no. Okay. Can we turn off this mic, maybe? Can you hear us, Lois? Hello, Lois. Are you
Hello.
back? We're going to try. I think Danny is reconnected with you there, so hopefully.
Oh, that's much better. I'm so sorry
No,
to
you're
have
fine.
stopped like that. I couldn't really.
I've moved to the World Economic Forum slide. I don't know if that's what you want to be at, or.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So the World Economic Forum has produced similar analysis that shows us that the risks that face businesses, society, politicians are changing, and we need to start looking at how we conduct business differently. So how do we know when we have achieved a green economy, or when we're on track for it? We can do that in one way by measuring our progress. If we can have the next slide, please. How are we measuring our progress? Some people would say that at the moment we're mismeasuring our progress because we're not taking into account certain crucial factors for, basically for our survival, as other speakers have said. So if we could move to the next slide, please. And although I can't currently see your screen, I'm assuming that this is the slide supporting architecture for the green economy. And I was going to come on to say that if we are to check our progress against creating a green economy, we will need some sort of supporting architecture to do that in the form of measurement, reporting, accounting and assurance structures, so that we can communicate the information that is necessary for us to assess our progress. Now, although many people have said that the recent Rio Plus 20 conference was a failure, one thing that came out of it, which is very helpful, is the acknowledgement by world governments of the importance of corporate sustainability reporting. And I'm sure you're all familiar with paragraph 47 of the Rio text that encourages governments and others to introduce and support corporate sustainability reporting. In fact, there's already been some progress towards that. if we can move to the next slide, please, entitled Landscape Overview. You're probably all familiar, those of you in business, that there's been a lot of activity on corporate reporting in the form of mandatory rules introduced by government. There have been some very advanced rules in Australia and America and Denmark that require sustainability reporting or specific reporting on aspects of sustainability like climate change. There are also lots of voluntary initiatives that support reporting practices and activity to build sustainable futures. The Carbon Disclosure Project, the GRI, and the OECD and the UN Global Compact. There are verification procedures to check that what is reported is correct and provide confidence to the users of information. There are various standards that support reporting organisations in preparing the information they are required to deliver. And there are indices and rating agencies that use criteria to assess the use of data that's being provided. Stock exchanges are also very active in this field, and we just heard from our colleague in Japan that the Tokyo Stock Exchange has apparently issued some rules that require reporting for registrants of sustainability type information. So if we could move to the next slide, please, which is observations about corporate reporting. Although there has been so much activity in corporate reporting, there's still problems with it. You've probably seen a lot of reports written on this subject. The Financial Reporting Council in the UK has issued a report claiming that annual reports are full of clutter. There's a perception that there's simultaneously too much information and not enough information in annual reports. So even some government departments, like the UK Department for Business Innovation and Skills, are taking action to see if they can bring some order to corporate reporting through their initiative on the future of narrative reporting. Accounting organisations are very active in this field. The ACCA, in their Accountancy Futures publication, has looked at reassessing the value of corporate reporting and has noted that a lot of reporting nowadays focuses on past results, but should perhaps be looking more at future plans of organisations to help markets determine how organisations are responding to the sorts of risks and changes that we saw in the slides that I showed from the World Economic Forum and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So if we could move to the next slide, please, called the value gap. You'll see that part of the problem that organisations have identified with reporting is the fact that there is a so-called value gap between the value that is attributed to the tangible assets of an organisation and the value that is made from the use of intangible assets. And as this slide shows, economies have really changed from producing value from tangible assets more now to a position where they produce value from intangible assets. I heard Gavin earlier saying that you had a piece of art on display that turned the invisible, I think you said it was waste and rubbish, into visible. And I think it's partly what integrated reporting seeks to do. We'll come on to integrated reporting in a bit more detail. The next slide, please. What the problems with corporate reporting produce is a mismatch between companies actually write in their corporate reports and the way in which they're creating value. So you can see in the green cell in the left-hand column on this slide that the focus is on past performance in reports. But actually, the business value comes more from things like plans for development and strategic growth. And this gap, this mismatch, this is where bubbles can be created. And I mean, Gavin gave an excellent summary of the carbon tracker thesis in their carbon bubble report. And if any of you get a chance to look at Rolling Stone magazine, a person called Bill McKibben has written a brilliant article in a recent Rolling Stone magazine about the nature of the carbon bubble that Gavin described earlier. But it's these gaps and mismatches that enable these bubbles to be created. If we can move to the next slide, please. What we see from these gaps is that investors know that some of their information needs are not being met. So there again, you get a plethora of reports, some of which I've put on this slide, saying that investors need more information about environmental, social, governance, intangible matters. And this is why we think that integrated reporting has come at just the right time. If we could to the next, please. These are two quotes from Albert Einstein and Hugo that are often used by our CEO, Druckmann, and our chairman, Professor Mervyn King. Particularly the quote from Victor Hugo, Mervyn King says that integrated reporting is powerful because it's an idea whose time has come. I think earlier Gabriel referred to the Higgs boson, and in fact, I was at the meeting of the Federation of European Economic Experts recently, where a member there compared integrated reporting to Higgs boson because it harnesses what was meant to be the origin of reporting and tries to make that work in a better way. If we could have the next slide, please. So what is integrated reporting? Here we have a working definition of integrated reporting as a set of processes and activities that are guided by the forthcoming integrated reporting framework and by integrated reporting as a mindset that will integrated thinking as a mindset that we'll come on to look at. So integrated reporting manifests itself in a set of communications about the way in which the organization's strategy, governance, performance, and prospects enable it to create and preserve value. The outcomes that we look for from integrated reporting and the communications that manifest that integrated reporting are better decision-making and resource allocation that is aligned with the creation and preservation of value and really sustainable value, as has been described by previous speakers today. If we could have the next slide, please. So, many people ask us what is different about integrated reporting compared to the sort of reporting we do now under all of the different initiatives that I showed you on an earlier slide. What integrated reporting adds to complement existing reporting is that it seeks to integrate currently disconnected strands of information so that investors and other stakeholders get a more holistic view of the way in which a company creates and sustains value. It focuses on the corporate stewardship, not just of financial capital, but of all types of capital, of economic capital, of human and social capital, manufactured capital, and intellectual capital. Integrated reporting has a slightly different focus to existing reporting, whereas existing reporting is very focused on the past financial results. Integrated reporting also brings in the connection between those past results and how they're going to be sustained into the future or changed in the future by a strategy because of different circumstances, including resource constraints that the company faces. The timeframes over which integrated reporting operates are therefore different. Whereas Current reporting is really looking back over 1 year and is provided often to make short-term decisions by investors. Integrated reporting encourages a longer-term view of information, both by the preparer and the user of information. We're hoping through integrated reporting that greater transparency produces greater trust in information, and that rather than solely be rule-bound, integrated reporting will enable companies to respond to the individual circumstances that they face, but enable that company to communicate what those individual circumstances mean for the value creation process. We have already talked about the fact that at the moment reporting has been accused of being full of clutter. So we hope through the forthcoming integrated reporting framework to enable companies to determine what is most material to them so that they produce more concise reports for their own benefit and benefit of users. Also, at the moment, to date, reporting has been very paper-based. We're seeing the emergence of more web-based reporting, and certainly support the use of technology for effective communication. Next slide, please. I talked earlier about integrated reporting, integrated thinking, that integrated reporting involves the application of integrated thinking, which Professor King describes as the application of the collective mind of those charged with the governance and management of organisation to map, monitor, manage and communicate the full complexity of the value creation process. I think it was Gavin earlier mentioned this interdependency and how important it is to understanding sustainability in its widest possible sense, financial and environmental sustainability. The whole notion of interdependency is very key to integrated reporting. So the factors that one might want to take into account include the sources and relationships on which an organisation tends to create value, the market context, the consumer context in which it operates, the risks and opportunities it faces, the activities it conducts, the results and performance it achieves, both in the past and in the future, and also factors that connect financial and non-financial information. Next slide, please. So I've referred to the integrated reporting framework as being a forthcoming framework. We are hoping that a draft framework will be available towards the end of this year, at the beginning of next year. I'm sure you get to Q&A, Mike will be able to tell you more about that. We know so far, though, that the integrated reporting framework is going to be a principles-based framework that can be used by reporting organisations to prepare their integrated reports. It will give reporting criteria about how integrated reporting should be prepared and presented. And it, as I said, will focus on concepts and principles rather than details of measurement, metrics and reporting. Now, I'll come to that in a second. We could go to the next slide, please. At the moment, we're working on, in preparation for preparing the draft integrated report, are certain threshold issues. We're looking at how to define and how organisations should communicate various issues: value, their business model, what types of capital they will refer to express their value creation process, how they will operate connectivity and interdependency and reflect it in integrated reporting. And of course, importantly, what is material? We'll be looking at how integrated reporting works in the current corporate reporting landscape. And as I say, at the moment, we're very focused on the integrated reporting framework development. Next slide, please. A question we get asked a lot is how will integrated reporting interact with existing practices? We already saw a slide listing so many of them. Well, existing reporting practices can be used to support integrated reporting. And here I just want to come on to say something about metrics. We're aware that lots of organisations, the World Resources Institute, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, Natural Capital Initiative, many organisations are already devising metrics that are going to be useful for supporting integrated reporting. And we don't intend to duplicate those. We will probably refer to metrics that can be used, that have been created by other organisations to support integrated reporting. But another thing with an earlier speaker, I think it might have been Gabrielle or Matt, was saying that metrics are very important, and indeed they are. But the one thing that perhaps we might also say is that not everything that has value can be quantified or attributed a monetary cost. In fact, we value clean air because it is free. So in developing our integrated reporting framework, we just need to balance the way in which we reference metrics that have been created by others that are useful for expressing how a company uses capital, but also to give us qualitative information about things that have value but can't necessarily be quantified. So secondly, we think that integrated reporting processes and activities can be applied to the preparation of existing reports. I mean, companies are already reporting, but we think if they adopt some integrated reporting principles of connectivity, for example, of understanding and communicating their value creation story, and that will help to improve existing reports and make them more relevant. And thirdly, integrated reporting is about an evolution of existing reporting. So, we're hoping not to supplant everything that companies already do, but to complement through the facilitation of an evolution of reporting. Now, the next slide, please. I'm just on the pre-penultimate slide here. The integrated reporting journey is, I've put this slide up to try to answer a commonly asked question about what will an integrated report look like? How will I know when I've got one? Well, my standard answer to that is you'll know when you've got an integrated report because it will make sense to you as a business. And Matt made this clear in his earlier talk, that reporting must support business as well as the stakeholders that rely on information. We think that there are various steps along the journey to integrated reporting whereby you can start to include material and relevant bits of corporate responsibility information in your annual report, where you'll combine the annual report and the corporate social responsibility report right through to the final part of the journey where you actually are using integrated reporting for running the business and communicating to your stakeholders. There is a draft indicative timeline for our work on the next slide. Michael might be able to elaborate on this in the Q&A section, but briefly we're hoping to issue the draft reporting framework by the end of this year or the beginning of next year for consultation. And I'm going to have to end there. Thank you very much, Gavin and Tony and others, for inviting me. And I will leave you from the International Integrated Reporting Council with Michael Nugent, who will be able to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Los. The technology kind of came and went and came again, but I think we got the essence of what you were saying. I'd like now to ask Justin, please, to come up and to talk to us about development goals for the future, particularly with regards to the Rio conference where Justin was attending, but also to talk about some of the third world issues and emerging developing country issues pertaining to sustainable business practice. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks very much, Gabriel. And my technology is pen and paper, so at least we'll get to the end of it. Whatever you think of it is another matter. The word in Rio was essentially that such is the severity of the challenges facing today's world, the financial crisis, persistent poverty, growing inequality, and the growing threat of climate change, that business as usual is not an option. And that phrase, business as usual is not an option, was repeated time and time again in workshops and seminars and even in plenary sessions with governments and so on. But unfortunately, the rhetoric was not backed by action. And as has been well reported in the media, Rio was a classical missed opportunity, as all the big issues were dodged, and the possibility of dealing with crises like food insecurity, resource depletion, and so many others that have been well articulated by all the different groups have somehow been just pushed aside. I was just reading in the newspaper this week two things. One story I'll tell later, but just now, we are for the third time in 5 years facing a global food crisis. In 2008, 2010, and now 2012. And you may recall that in 2010, this resulted in massive social upheaval in 30 countries, with people taking to the streets, rioting, and so on. And its cause is a massive drought in the United States of America. The United States is one of the largest food suppliers in the world, and the supply of soya, maize, and wheat is now at such critical low levels due to massive drought that they're forecasting food shortages throughout the world, not only in the developing world, but Japan, Korea, and many other wealthy countries are now going to be paying top dollar to get the much needed food that their people require. One of the big competitors is the biofuel companies. And they have to meet targets that have been agreed by governments, the EU, and so on. And they are in the market buying up this food to make fuel for our cars. And it is the people in the developing world who have no clout in this battle in the market. East Africa is again this year facing a critical food shortage. You might recall last year when Mary Robinson and some others of us from the development agencies went to Somalia and to Kenya, to Turkana, and to demonstrate the dreadful impact of climate change in that part of the world. And our offices in those countries are now gearing up for a major, major crisis, because these are the countries who cannot compete for the reduction in food in the world this year. And it will not just be hunger, it will be many other social crises that they will have to face. Rio was about sustainable development. And sustainable development can be defined thus. It's development that meets the needs of the present without compromising future generations to meet their needs. And one of the phrases that was very strong in Rio was that of intergenerational justice. And Mary Robinson used that many times in the 35 platforms from which she spoke in a week in Rio. And we are the generation that is handing on this planet to the next, for the first time in definitely worse condition than that in which we inherited it. And we have mortgaged our children and our grandchildren, not only through what we've done in the country with the economy, but what we're doing to the planet, to those future generations all over the world, by overdeveloping our economies and our societies at the cost of those who cannot participate in that development process. The other thing I saw in the paper this week, which just in the light of this conference, it stuck in my mind. In Alaska at the moment, There is a major debate over the development of mines. New mines are reckoned to be worth over $500 billion in resources of copper, silver, and gold. They are located right on the shore of where the salmon stocks of the Pacific come every year to spawn, to what all it is that they do to produce the salmon that we all rely on, of so many people in that part of the world. And if this mine is developed, all the research shows that that fantastic resource of the salmon will be polluted to the point where it will disappear. 14,000 jobs immediately dependent on that salmon industry, but not only that. It is the whole ecosystem. The resource that those salmon grounds are to the world is invaluable in terms of what it does for the present and for the future about maintaining ecological balance. And yet it may now be sacrificed for the short-term benefits of meeting the needs of the technology industries that are crying out for the copper so that our mobile phones and our iPads and our interconnectivity and all the rest of it will be up to date and the market will roll on and we'll be buying all the latest things that come out. We can meet today's market needs or we can meet the future generations' needs for a sustainable and balanced planet. That is the crisis they are facing in Alaska. And of course, in an election year where a president can make the right decision and perhaps lose the votes, or make the wrong one and sell us all out, that is a difficult position to be in. That is the political reality in which these issues are being addressed. So in terms of the balance of the world, it's interesting to note, in terms of growing inequality, we've talked a lot about poverty over the years, but as we have developed the economy throughout the world, we are seeing massive inequalities growing up, particularly in China and India, even in our own society. The top 20% of the world's population control 70% of income, and the bottom 20% have 2%. And it is reflected in carbon emissions, the top 13% producing 50% of carbon emissions globally. And interestingly, we in Ireland produce almost exactly 100 times per capita the carbon emissions of Uganda. So we in our work in Trócaire have undertaken research to see what are the real impacts of the climate change phenomenon on the poorest people. And in Kenya, Malawi, Bolivia, and Honduras, we have done a 4-year research project tracing communities with whom we are working to see what has been the impact. And it is just simply devastating those who are the poorest, with rainfall now totally unpredictable and decreasing, or when it does come, coming in floods. So one way or the other, your crop either dies in the ground from drought or is washed away by having 2 months' rain overnight. The people are giving up. Migration to the cities is growing, and young people just don't have a future, and they're moving out. And we're seeing rural communities shrinking because they cannot cope with the impact of climate change. So, sustainable development. We have to change the model that is causing this crisis. And as Einstein said there, current thinking will not solve the problem. The logical outcome of what we have been at is what is producing the problems that we face today. And the model really has got to be, as Gabriel has mentioned earlier, but a real commitment to socially and environmentally sustainable development that is also economically sustainable. And by economically sustainable, we don't just mean profits, but really long-term value that is added and that serves the community. Rio failed for various reasons. Essentially, the lack of political leadership in the world. There just wasn't the gumption there amongst the leaders that came and those that didn't come because they didn't want to be associated with it to take the decisions that are necessary for moving the whole question of sustainable development to the level which it needs to go. The outcome document was, you wouldn't even call it a classic compromise. The Brazilian government, realizing that they weren't going to get agreement on the document that had been negotiated, decided that they weren't going to put up with the indignity of having no outcome document in a process that bears the name of Rio. And in a classic political expedient move, they simply removed everything that was contentious, put a cover on what was left, and presented it as the consensus document. And by the time we all got there, the thing had already been agreed. Some of the things that weren't included: a UN High Commissioner for Sustainability and Intergenerational Justice. This would have been a post that would have accountability attached to it, the equivalent of what Mary Robinson was as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. That there would be targets that would have to be met, there would have to be integrated reporting to this individual, and countries would be named and shamed on the basis of whether they had met those or not. Not a chance. No one was going to put themselves in that situation. Fossil fuel subsidies. This was another one. Fossil fuel subsidies are over $1 trillion a year to produce fossil fuels. And there was a very firm recommendation that these should be eliminated and the funds put to all kinds of other activities that would substitute for that. Loan guarantee programs, for instance, for those investing in renewable energy, to even subsidize renewable energy, to stabilize the long-term pricing of renewable energy so it brings stability into the market. Many other ways in which that $1 trillion could really have contributed, just thrown out. Not prepared to take the steps necessary in relation to that. So people left a bit dejected. Just kind of saying, well, what is the point of all of this? You come together every 5 years, you have this great big talk shop, and you go away again. But there was hope there, in the sense of people who gathered in the many different fora, the civil society forum downtown, the different people who came from the business community, from local authorities, those not in government, who really were prepared to say, well, we will take initiatives on our own. And I think this is becoming something of the future of this. Perhaps these global summits have run their course. They produced commitments in the 80s and the 90s, and they moved things on. But time and time again, over the last 10 years, we seem to be just faced with failure. And indeed, the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, said to us, the civil society representatives, you must take this up now and keep working with it. Because unless it's the people and the people's organizations who are going to drive this agenda, it is not going to be driven from the top. And that is a real challenge that has been put there. But there is a thing called the UN Global Compact, in which 7,000 businesses represented in Rio have signed up to this, and where they've signed up to align strategies on business development with human rights, labor, environment, and ethical principles. And so we're seeing, even in the business community, a sense of frustration and the need to take these issues on yourselves and say, we will now go with this. And people are recognizing that this is what the consumer wants. The consumer feels disempowered in this enormous problem of climate change and what can I do about it? How many light bulbs can I change to make a difference? You know, you go to, I think, Miami or somewhere like that in the summer, and you see all these buildings being air-conditioned, and you think, my 10 long-life bulbs, yeah? What a contribution to this. But at the same time, people want to make a difference. They want to be part of this effort to develop a sustainable world, and research is showing that 60% of consumers globally feel empowered by having a choice in terms of what they are purchasing. And 80% worldwide feel that companies have a part to play in tackling the problem of global poverty. And in Ireland, that figure goes up to 89%. The fair trade movement has shown, with growth year on year, that people want to have choice and they want to be able to make a choice in favor of their values. And I do believe there's a real opportunity for business, as there is for us as the NGOs and other organizations, to take those issues that were neglected in Rio and run with them ourselves. And on the Rio document, there is a list of about 25 areas of where there have been, if you like, detailed agreement on small, the smaller issues, not the global issues, but around sustainable tourism, around energy production, around the treatment of the oceans and the mountains, about the dealing with indigenous peoples. Lots and lots and lots of areas which are open and really ready for real change in terms of bringing sustainable principles to work on them. And I have no doubt that in all of those, there are places for business to really make a real contribution. And not just a fast buck. And this is the thing that people are worried about, particularly the citizens of the developing world that were there. They talk about greenwashing the economy. That a company can come out and, with kind of a sweep of a brush and, kind of a few clever phrases and, doing a little bit of this, a bit of the other. Sure, that's us sorted now. We're environmentally sustainable, and then just ploughing on largely as before. It is fundamental change that people are looking for. As Gabriel said in his introductory remarks, what we've been doing has failed us spectacularly. And if we think we can put it back together, as largely was, with a large dollop of green paint over it and say, well, that's it, fixed, we are just fooling ourselves. There is a challenge for fundamental change, and there is a growing appetite for fundamental change amongst the people who are the consumers, that really there is a challenge that needs to be met. So, yeah, there's lots of other things I could say, but I think I'm down to my last minute. So on the basis that no one ever gave out when someone finished early, I'd say thanks very much. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Justin. And to end with a little injection of passion, it goes a long way. I'm going to just briefly kind of revise some of the key points as I would have seen. Matt spoke about energy, climate change, and resources, and about resource efficiency and resource depletion. And actually, in many ways, this debate is about resources, and there's kind of geopolitical issues here as well, where some of the most scarcest rare earth metals and other key resources that we take for granted in modern day living are actually falling into the hands of quite a small few of very powerful corporations and countries. And it is an issue that needs to be brought out. He spoke about the national economic and social forum policies for low carbon environment. And I thought what was quite interesting, and in fairness to the EPA, I don't know whether they were mandated to do this or whether they did it of their own volition, but their report on the status of the Irish environment, I remember seeing the first one shortly after I joined Bord na Móna, and I said, well, thanks be to God that there's somebody that's actually going around and checking and reporting, and while it may not have had legal impetus to actually do things and take people to task over this, at least they were pointing it out. And unfortunately, like so many good reports, that it doesn't always get the sort of elevation and the sort of reportage that it should be getting. And I think when we talk about policies, and I know we're probably under time, but I thought from your contribution, Matt, sometimes I say to myself is, we've got a lot of existing regulations. Even if we were to bloody well implement the things that we've got and get people to police them properly and to bring people to task over it. And, I talk about the waste and I talk about other areas. We've seen a lot of bad behavior, illegal behavior going on in terms of waste management in this country. And you know what? I just don't see people, and it's a bit like the financial scandals and illegality that has gone on, to think that we have to wait so many years for people to be brought to task. And, Justin, I know you'll probably be critical, and we were talking about outside about America, but you know what? Sometimes it's nice to see somebody in clinkers, in ankle irons and so forth, that have committed terrible crimes and been brought to justice. And in fairness to the Americans, that's one particular feature that I think is right. Now, let's fully accept that justice has to be done and to be seen to be done. And the other point that I'd say is about alignment of policies. You know, we've got famous spatial strategies in this country. We're talking about more sustainable conurbations. You know, there's been a big debate about, you know, ceasing and desisting from so-called ribbon development and all the unsustainable elements then that go with that basic principle. In other words, trying to deliver services, water services, electricity services, and so forth into, you know, houses that are just put up wherever somebody feels like it. And sometimes I say to them, we get one part of it right, as in we say, okay, we come up with a spatial strategy, but then we don't get the other parts of it, our energy strategy and our water strategy. And, you know, if it costs, you know, 50 cents to connect somebody in a city to the power network, why should somebody in a totally unsustainable environment pay the same? They should be paying more. And they should be paying more for the water, and maybe that will help to drive this more sustainable approach to this. I'm not getting into a debate about where people should live and be allowed to live and so forth, but I'm talking about consistency and alignment of policy. It's not always there. Sorry, you didn't say that, Matt, and I'm supposed to be saying what you did say. The global, Los, and I don't know if Los, if you're still there, and Mike is there. I thought, you know, it's good to see that somebody in the Western, we have in Ireland have adopted a lot of the British standards in terms of reporting and so forth, and a lot of our standards, like our stock exchange is a subsidiary to a certain extent. Deirdre Summers mightn't want to hear it, but it is very much aligned to the UK stock market and stock market rules and so forth. I think it's important that we start driving on now from a regulatory point of view and getting reporting and getting the integrated reporting framework. I think we need to drive this on because, you know, I go back to this thing, if it's not measurable, it's not manageable, and there are too many issues, you know, that you have highlighted. There's a lot of debate about the value gap, you know, the value attributed to tangible and intangible. I thought that was striking because then it shows the way that maybe, you know, it might be reality, but I would surmise that there's a certain amount of manipulation has gone on in terms of, you know, the value that we attributed to intangibles. God be with the days when you had something, it was an asset and there was a value on it. Now there's, and when you see the value of you know, Facebook and so forth, and you say to yourself, well, where is this all going? Reporting mismatches between historical and future, even with the existing reporting and the existing accountancy bodies, I think everybody accepts this, you know, that when you come to your annual report, really the investors want to know what's happening tomorrow, and they're not that pushed about what happened yesterday. And I think that is a critical issue. But it's good to see integrated reporting framework. It's good to see that the principles are being put together and this evolution is starting. And, you know, I look forward to seeing drafts coming forward in 2013. And I'd like, again, like a lot of other areas, I'd like to see it getting a little bit of aeration and a little bit of action, because we're running out of time, as so many of the speakers have said. Justin, in fairness, added a bit of passion into the thing, and I think that you have to be passionate as well when you're looking at, and he's probably been exposed more than others to some of the consequences of our unsustainable practices. It reminds me of there's a biologist, an eminent biologist in Stanford University, Peter Vitosik, I think is his name, and I remember he made a very famous comment. I won't quote it like for like, but I think he made something to the effect that, you know, we're the first generation with the tools and the capability and the science and the facts and the data to know the impact that we're having on the environment. And we're probably the last generation that are in a position to do something about it before it goes into uncontrollable breakdown. Justin, you spoke about income distribution, you spoke about intergenerational justice, and I suppose last but not least, you spoke about the Rio, and I think that a lot of people do have, I think that we have to be careful here, on one hand, that a degree of cynicism doesn't come in with regards to all these conferences, because as I said outside, it has become somewhat of a kind of a circus now. They're going off to Rio. It's a bit like the Olympics, you know, it's in London this year, and we're all set for Rio in whatever. I think that it's time now that action, it's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult because there are geopolitical issues and so forth. And you know, generally speaking, you know, you find that the Republican Party in America would have one particular view, for instance, on energy policy, and the Democratic Party has another view. And you know, when you're having these intergovernmental conferences or climate change conferences, you nearly have to time it, get it right vis-a-vis election dates and all this sort of stuff. So, and it's the same in many other countries. I think that's hopefully it's given a kind of a summary, and I'd like to invite the audience now to participate, please. Thanks. Maybe if I could ask for you to just say your name, perhaps, and the organisation that you're from. Thanks.
Molly Walsh, Friends of the Earth. I was struck by what you said about sustainability and capitalism not being easy bedfellows, I think you said. And I think the panel we have here now probably have some really interesting perspectives on that. I know, Justin, you've probably seen some of the uglier sides of our unsustainable model of development. And I wonder how does Trócaire negotiate that position where, personally, I don't think capitalism is going away anytime soon. It's the system that we live and work in, yet it has so many problems with sustainability. And Matt, your new director, drew a little controversy when she said she wanted to streamline the agency to better facilitate economic growth. And I wonder, EPA is also a unique position within this difficult conundrum between sustainability and capitalism. How do we negotiate that conundrum?
I'll just say, take it first there. It's on, is it? We're on here. Just to, one could argue that sustainability and socialism and communism don't go hand in hand either. So I don't think it's just a question of capitalism and sustainability. It's the way the world has been run, particularly since the middle of the 19th century. That's the problem in relation to resources. And those twin issues of climate change and resource use, they're problems everywhere, no matter what kind of political structure is in place, whether it's in Eastern Europe in the past, in Western Europe, the same problem emerges. And that's, I guess, is why, as a problem, it has to be tackled from a global perspective. And it's back to that old, language of think global but act locally, in terms of trying to figure out what we can actually do about this. And like the policy objectives that I was talking about, where are the things that are happening at European level in particular, in terms of the move to a lower carbon, more resource efficient economy. The words are easy. The actions are what are going to be really difficult in this. But you have to start somewhere. And the fact that we can now see the language of lower carbon, resource efficient, which, by the way, is what Laura was talking about when she was talking about supporting economic growth. It wasn't the old style of economic growth that she was referring to. It was low carbon and resource efficient economic growth, which is a very different kettle of fish. And we're beginning to see now the start of that language entering the policy sphere, and that's the first step. You gotta these problems, these issues are so large that it is so easy when you hear Justin talking about the sense of disappointment at the end of the Rio conference. It was the same back, I remember the climate change conference in Copenhagen there was so much expectation for that particular conference, and anybody who knew what was going on in the world at the time could have predicted that there was only going to be one outcome in terms of whether people were going to be disappointed or happy at the end of it all. And that's precisely what happened. So, you know, the issues have to be continued to be dealt with and discussed at global level, but the policy implementation challenge is, how do you bring all this back down to be meaningful for you, for me, for people who run small businesses in a country like Ireland, for people who have families, who are just living their ordinary everyday lives. And that's the trick, because that actually ultimately is what mainstreaming and integration is about. It's about it becoming real and meaningful for all of us here, for ordinary people, for our kids. And until that happens, and and that's happening too, but that's a marker of change to keep an eye on. You will all leave here this evening, you go off, you go back to your lives. Will you think about this at all in the next week or so? If you don't, then it hasn't made any difference. But ultimately, that's what is needed. It's that change in thinking is the sort of change that's needed to get us to a point where we actually start to construct a different kind of an economic model. And it's not going to be easy.
From our perspective, I put it like this. We've heard a lot in the last 10, 20 years about corporate social responsibility. And there's an element by which, it's kind of, it looks good in the annual report to be able to say, and out of our profits and because of the hard work of our staff who put a lot of time and effort into it, we supported this project somewhere. But does it change anything fundamentally about the relationship between, if you like, capital and society and the market and so on? And we would prefer to talk about corporate social accountability. And interesting enough, listening to Lois's presentation, I didn't hear the word accountability mentioned. Now, it may have been implied throughout. I wasn't quite sure because I was still kind of studying my own words. But what does corporate social accountability mean? It means that, for instance, people who are investing in the developing countries, that they will pay taxes, that they won't just salt it all away in tax havens, that they will pay proper salaries, that they will respect the right of workers to organise and demand proper conditions, that people will be treated with dignity in terms of their work and they'll have a sense of participation and sharing in the enterprise, that they will respect the nature and environment in which they're working. It won't be just voracious exploitation of the resources, that they will have proper and open and transparent agreements between government and corporations so that everybody knows what's going on. So many of the deals done between major investors and developing countries now are just done in hotel rooms, in office buildings, in ministries. No one knows. Not even Parliament is aware. But that'd be another aspect of it, is reporting to Parliament so that the budget is clear, where it's coming from. And that would transform the way corporations operate in the developing world. It doesn't have to have an ology attached to it. It's just about being ethical, about not supporting corrupt regimes, about respecting people's rights and recognizing that people make a contribution to your enterprise and they're entitled to a fair share of the wealth generated and to a decent job and to be able to contribute to their society. So, it's not complicated to say it, but getting from where we are to that kind of a relationship is very, very difficult indeed.
Michael, perhaps if you could maybe make a comment or two about the accountability verb that seems to be we're referring to, please.
Yeah, sure. The International Integrated Reporting Framework has two sort of focuses. One is investor decision making, ensure resources allocated appropriately across the economy. But the second part of it is accountability and stewardship of a range of capitals, not just financial capital, or Lois probably mentioned this, financial capital, human capital, intellectual capital, natural capital, which is very important to what you're talking about at the moment. So although it's within a paradigm of capitalism as it is at the moment, it's trying to be more transparent and open the doors for people to see inside the engine of capitalism for businesses so that they can be held more accountable. Actual stewardship of those resources and the accountability be driven by regulation and legislation, but the framework will help open the doors and bring that about.
Thanks, Michael. We got about every third word, but I heard accountability mentioned.
I hope it's a good word.
So sorry about that. The technology is letting us down a small little bit. Are there any other questions, please? Yes, young gentleman there in the green. Yeah?
Well,
Please.
I'm Pork McGowan, and I don't belong to any organization yet. But I agree to the last person to the point where this sustainability and immediate capitalism don't come together, and also how it's just, I think that the only problem with this is that people's lifestyles will change so drastically they might not totally, it's not going to be a very warm welcome. I'm actually wondering, I mean, it's a great idea, I see it up front and I totally agree with it, but does everyone, like the average people, really agree? I mean, they think that first of all, like, yeah, it's a great initiative, we're going to help the environment, but they kind of have a lifestyle, and it's such a consumerist way that the world works now. Would sustainability really be able to support the current lifestyle or not? That's the question.
Well, it's a very, very good point. On the other hand, just one little aspect of it that perhaps, and then I'll invite some other comments from Matt and from Justin. You know, I remember it's not too long ago when we all used to throw everything into the waste paper bin, and it all went somewhere, and that was that. Today, thankfully, our kids are correcting the parents for not putting the paper and the recyclables into the paper and recyclables, and putting the organic waste into the brown bin and so forth. So I think that, yeah, I think there's a lifestyle issue. Society are always trying to improve their lifestyles and their I don't know how it's measured. Certainly I take Justin's point about, you know, we're going to be handing over the planet to the next generation in a worse condition than we found it ourselves. But I think certain aspects it can be done without having a negative impact on lifestyle. I don't know if there's anybody, Matt, if you.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I'm more of a half glass full than a half glass empty person, I suppose. So I always look around me for signs of hope when we're talking about these sorts of issues. And if you look at Ireland, like one of the things that's beginning to happen in Ireland now, post the Celtic Tiger, is that the whole sense of community is beginning to become stronger again. And that's good, because that's something that we lost in the 10 years or so of the Celtic Tiger, when there was a much greater interest in the individual than in the collective. But there's the basic underlying ingredients of community development remained in Ireland during all that period, and I think it's beginning now to resurface again. Like if you look around the country at things like the tidy towns, for example, and the amount of work and effort that people put into their local communities, I don't think there's very few people who intentionally want to hand a worse world over to their children and the future generations. You know, it's not part of the human condition, I don't think, that we want to make a worse world for our children than the ones that we got from our parents, you know? So I think, again, it comes back to education, to raising awareness, to giving people things that they can use in very practical ways to help them start reducing their environmental impact and to get a better understanding of what the linkages are between, you know, driving the car, using petrol, the sort of thing that Justin mentioned about the copper, you know, that everything we do has a consequence because we're all part of this big natural ecosystem. Yet, a lot of people, yeah, they might have a fairly basic understanding of that, but when it comes to big consumer choices, they probably don't spend a huge amount of time thinking about it. But there is evidence that that's improving. And I think when you marry the likes of community strength and resilience with better information, better knowledge, then there is you're starting to see, I think, the ingredients of hope there, that people can change. I can't see how there can't be some impact on quality, on not so much quality of life, but the standard of living or whatever. You know, there's got to be some change that's going to happen to people's lives that will be very different 100 years or 150 years time than now, simply for no other reason than, you know, the whole energy situation is going to be totally different anyway, because eventually the oil is going to run out, and that ultimately might be the thing that will really get people to start waking up and thinking more about this stuff, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but it's often worth repeating that if the 7 billion people in the world today were to live at the standard that we enjoy in Ireland, it would require the resources of 4 planet Earths to sustain it. So we're in a situation now where simply our lifestyle is not exportable around the world. One of the signs of hope I saw about this was in Rio at the People's Forum, where we had about 40,000 people who came from all over the world to discuss these issues away from the main conference centre. And what came across was that we're not envied at all. In fact, most of the comment from the articulate voices of the South were, what a mess you've made of it. This economic crisis you're floundering around in, and you've kind of driven the whole place balmy, and we've no intention of going down that road. We have other views about how the world should be developed and how there should be harmony between the human race and nature, and how we see all of this working together. And this is not kind of hippie, kind of cockeyed stuff. These are politicians, these are academics, these are social society leaders, eminent people who are thinking afresh and thinking very creatively. So the other thing is that it has been said before that overdevelopment is the worst form of human greed, and that we in the West have essentially overdeveloped ourselves. We're not particularly any happier for all that we have acquired over the last 20, 30 years of unparalleled growth. We simply have created appetites. I was just listening this morning that the Apple's sales are down at the moment because everyone who wants a new iPhone is waiting for the 5th generation, so they're not buying the 4th. My gosh, what a way it's going to change their life, you know, when the 5th one comes out. So many more apps can you stick on it. This is not enhancing people's lives. It's just offering more toys and baubles and so on. So I think I think there will be a change in values. And I'll tell you something which I find interesting, is I actually believe that my kids will not be as well off as I am. I'm seeing it in my nieces and nephews who are a bit older than my kids, that the houses they are buying and moving into as their final house is not of the same standard as that of their parents. And there's an acceptance, I think, in the new generation that they're going to deal with this in a different way. I don't feel resentment. People say, oh, we really would have loved a 4-bedroom house, but we're settling for this 3-bedroom one, and we maybe put on an extension eventually or go into the roof. And I think that generation, and many of you are here today, so I'm not going to be talking on your behalf, but I see that there is a change of view coming. And on that basis, I think with new leadership, I think one of the big problems in today's world is there's no political leadership. There just isn't. Look at what's happening in Europe on the economic crisis. They haven't a clue. And in terms of the global crisis or in terms of climate change, there is no leadership. And that is why there's a great opportunity for civil society organizations, be they not-for-profits, for-profits, professional institutes, to take leadership roles and start changing the agenda.
Thanks, Justin. Please, the lady in the purple. Here.
Actually, I've got a question for Matt and a comment for Justin.
Sorry, can I just ask you if your name, please? And,
sorry, I'm Rita and I'm just a consumer.
Very good. Very good.
Okay. I'm just wondering about the word sustainability. I see it turning up everywhere. And as somebody who likes to pay a little bit extra for sustainability, I'm getting a little bit sick of it. And I was wondering if there's some way that you could actually legally protect the word sustainability and link it to environmental sustainability. Because, I mean, you can use sustainability in a context, in any context, and it'll fit. And there's nothing to stop people doing that, and they're doing it. And it's getting a bit annoying. So I'm just wondering if that's an option. And for Justin, I've got a comment.
Okay.
Why settle for food security when you can go for food sovereignty? It's just a concept that I've been introduced to lately. I mean, I think it's about time we took back control of our food systems. I know people in the global south are doing it a lot more, and they're talking about it, and it's a building movement. But I don't think we should be settling sorry, for letting big global organisations kind of control the ebb and flow of how much food we've access to. I know we don't get it in the neck the way people in the global south do, but I think it's something maybe we should take into account, not settling for just the concept of food security, but going for it. You know, why should we deny ourselves the best we can get and take control of our food systems and just... Sorry, I'm not expressing myself terribly well.
I know the point. I know the question that you're saying, and it ties in. Now, I might just agglomerate. Can I take your question as well, please?
Yeah. So it's a part comment and part question. My name is David Quinn of UrbMet. Justin, now you talked a little bit about civil leadership, perhaps filling the void. But I think one of the challenges really is getting access to data in understanding what's going on, both at sort of an urban level and national level. The current data that's out there frequently just reflects the financial structures that are in place. And when you look at Ireland, I really think it lags behind the curve compared to other countries. The US and the UK are very proactive in terms of resource measurement type accounting. And I think Ireland could probably make a lot of progress in terms of greater open data policies in all aspects of reporting in relation to sustainability.
Okay, thanks, David. So just take the sustainability and a definition for it. The food control, who controls the choke strings, if you like, on the food chain, and then this issue of measurement and data. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think that there's always been a problem with the term sustainable development. I remember when it came out first, and went back in 1987 or whatever it was, when the Brundtland Commission came up with the term. I don't know, like whatever works. Like from a communications point of view, it doesn't matter. Like so it's whatever works to help people understand better what it is that they need to do. So I think if you look at things like, I'm looking at Morris up there in the corner on the green hospitality. I think when you get down to the brass tacks of, say, working with businesses about sustainability, you're not talking about sustainability, you're talking about how much energy are you using? What can you do to reduce your energy inputs? How do you measure all of that? What are you paying for your water at the moment? Do you know where it's coming from? How can you reduce your water consumption? So it's, and that is actually what it's like, for most of us, that's what it's about, whether you're running a business or whether you're living your life. It's, how you are behaving yourself in relation to things you do. And I think using that sort of language just about energy, water, waste is far more practical. And if people take the steps and take the actions, because see, that's the thing. It's not, the theory is fine. It's the action that's difficult. And maybe part of the problem is with the term sustainable development is we still really haven't moved to the action bit in a major way. Because I think at Rio, there was a bit of talk about the terminology there as well, that it outlived its sort of usefulness.
So Justin, have you any comments on the food issue? Because food obviously is a critical issue you've alluded to in your presentation, and this concept of who controls, which I think is the question that you're saying. Yeah, pardon? Food sovereignty. And food sovereignty. Actually, who's got the control levers on the food production chain, if you like, and where it comes from and where it goes to and how it's priced? Yeah.
Well, it's a point well made. The point I made in my presentation was just to highlight in today's world that we're in this very vulnerable situation where, because of the way that we have developed the world, climate change in the US, people in East Africa starve. So the question is begged, well, why aren't the people in East Africa growing their own food and being independent in terms of, and that is precisely what so many of us in the developing business, and be it NGOs or international organizations, are trying to achieve. And we spend 35% of our income on livelihoods, and most of it is on rural development, because the vast majority of people in the developing world live in rural context, and it is about helping them to become sustainable around food, around income, and so on. In terms of the control of the food supply in the world, I mean, that is a big issue. There are 5 companies, essentially, that control about 70 or 80% of the world food market. And for me, the issue around GM crops is not so much the GM bit of it. I mean, you can argue the science backwards and forwards, but I think people have been eating GM food for a good long time now, and they're not any the worse for it. What is really important is that you have, if you have the patents on the GM food, you control the food supply for the world. And that is what these companies are really after. And they really tried it when they brought in the suicide seeds, which would simply not reproduce. So that each year, the farmers would have to go back and buy the seeds and buy the fertilizers and the pesticides. The whole package would have to be bought year after year after year. An actual, very cynical approach to actually eliminating sustainability and having it purely based on the market. So, for me, that is the real issue around food, that people should be as self-sustainable as possible, whether it's individually or in communities or within their own economy and society. And of course, that begs the question too about our own Irish situation and the common agricultural policy, because this is talking against ourselves, where we're saying open the markets to the developing world so they can export here, and we might revert the thing and find that we're not even food sovereign ourselves in the long run. I just throw that in for a bit of gas.
But I think to throw in another bit of gas, you could talk about the obesity issue in the Western world, and that is a real emerging issue. And that's a different type of sustainability. But there's a lady up here in the white, please. Yeah.
Just to add to the gas note, my name is Mary Frances O'Conneilla. I'm from Hands Across the Corrib in Galway, where it hasn't stopped raining for 2 weeks. On the point of resources, I often wonder how much water runs down the sink when I'm washing my hands. So the thought comes to mind, very practical one. Suppose we put in the stopper. We could all go home today and put in the stopper when we're washing our hands and just rinse off in the end. Okay, take that one with you. And the other suggestion I have is whatever happened to the clothesline, couldn't we bring that back too? And we'd be saving energy. I sent an email to the White House recently suggesting that to Michelle. I told her it would sit very nicely beside the vegetable patch.
When you commented on, you wouldn't want to have been trying to dry any clothes in Ireland for the last 3 months. But indeed. Well, the West has been getting fantastic weather, so it has, and the Volvo race and all the good things. Gentleman in the white, please.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Michael Ewing. I'm the coordinator of the Environmental Pillar, a coalition of 27 national environmental organisations working together to advance sustainability. I would like to speak in support of the intervention of the young man in green up there. I think he hit the nail very much on the head. If we don't actually address the issues of consumption, and I was kind of amused to hear somebody describe himself as a consumer earlier on, because in fact that's how we're considered by the multinationals and so on. We are actually not people, we are consumers. That's our role on this planet, to consume. Until we can reverse that trend, then we haven't a hope of getting a sustainable future. And the power of the corporations through advertising, controlling behavioural change, means it's a very uphill struggle for us to do the opposite. Because what they want us to do is to consume more and more stuff. Whether it's useful or helpful or worthwhile is irrelevant, but we need to consume it, and that's the point, to keep the wheels turning. That's on a broader scale. Now, just on a very personal scale, an action that anybody can take. I don't know how many people in this room have pensions. Perhaps you just raise your hands up if you have a pension fund, if you don't mind, just to see. Okay, everybody who has a pension fund, check to see where your pension fund's being invested. It's worth globally trillions, the pension funds, and they're being invested on your behalf into all sorts of things that you wouldn't approve of. Get yourself an ethical pension fund. That's something you can do very personally, which will make a big change on the planet. Thank you.
Can I ask just one question? Very good comments. You're involved in this sustainability. How do you define sustainability pertaining to what the lady, I think, was asking? You were asking the question about this, there's a lot of confusion. People have different definitions of sustainability, and, from your perspective, you like to get products that are environmentally sustainable. Other companies are marketing products that are sustainable, but they might not be environment. What's your view on it, given the...
My view of sustainability is this. I have a vision of, I'm sure you're all aware of the idea of the Russian doll, where one doll fits inside the other and it fits inside the other. Well, basically, the vision of sustainability is this. We came as a species from the environment, from the earth, from the living world. And we go back there ultimately, obviously, but we came from that, and we rely on it entirely, totally and entirely for our existence. We've created a society which has rules and ways of behaving between ourselves which vary from place to place, but these are created by us, and there are ways of living within that environment. And then beyond that again, we've created an economic system. That economic system is entirely of our invention, and we can change it whenever we like. There is no bailout for the environment. We can bail out our economic system, we cannot bail out the environment. So sustainability is living within the relationship between ourselves as animals, living within an ecosystem which supports us. And if we don't do that, then we're going to destroy the very thing that keeps us alive.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to finish up now, and I'd like to call on Tina Roach, who's the Chief Executive of Business in the Community, who are the organisation that are behind this conference, and indeed the organisation behind a lot of other developments and other initiatives in this area. And Tina is very, very active in promoting sustainability and sustainable business practice, and she's a very convincing lady, having hooked myself and indeed Bord na Móna into Business in the Community, and we're very, very proud to be part of it. So Tina, if you'd like to say something. Thanks.
Well, I'll just wrap it up very quickly. Just on leadership, I think in political leadership there is a huge absence of it right across the world. However, I see in Ireland great business leaders who are actually trying to do something around sustainability within their organisations. One who's sitting beside me, in fact, is Marks & Spencer's, and the work that they've done in the last 5 years is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Zero waste to landfill. It's an amazing achievement. 30% of all of their transport, use of fossil fuels out, 30% of their transport costs gone. There's no recognition of what is going right and no modelling. And we should look to some of our business leaders in Ireland to actually explain what's happening. You look at Intel, and the work that they're doing is incredible as well. So I do think we have leaders. I do think that we need to do more between the business leaders and our civil society leaders to really drive change, because there's a big misalignment about what's happening in politics. You take, for instance, the whole idea that by 2020 we're going to put our food, we're going to increase our food resources, our land, to export huge amounts of food. We do that at the cost of our environment, because at present we have cattle of about 5 million, we have 3.5 million sheep. So we're looking at increasing that, and that's the policy. And the misalignment is that we have an environmental carbon to meet And we're not going to do it if we continue to pick policies which don't address that. As I go back to business again, has addressed this within major companies, not all, but a lot of them. And it would be good to see, to have that discussion more between business and civil society. I just want to say it was really interesting, the discussion today was really interesting, and on behalf of business and the community, thank you so much to our speakers, and Gabriel, once again, you're fantastic. So thanks very much for your time as well.
Thank you, everybody. That wraps it up. Thank you very much. Well done, Justin. Well done, Matt. Well done, Gavin. Yeah.